Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome to Upcoming Wargames. In this series, we're going to take a look at some wargames that are in the development and production queues of some various wargaming companies. We're going to talk a little bit about each game, and then I'm going to spend a couple minutes to talk a little bit about why this game in particular may have piqued my interest and why I'm excited about its release. Now, some of these games might be released in the next couple weeks, and some of these games might be in game companies' various kind of production minimum queues, where they have to reach a certain amount of minimum orders before they really start to go into production and see the light of day. So it's a range of everything in this series. I will also say these games are in no ranking, it's not a particular order, and this is not a comprehensive list. We're going to take a look at 10 games, but I could probably put in about 30 or 40 war games into this whole thing if we made more videos. So without any further delay, let's jump in and take a look at our first game. So our first game is a game that actually, by the time this video hits YouTube, this game may already be shipping. So it is about as near to an upcoming release as we could possibly get. Of course, I'm talking about Pacific War from GMT Games, designed by Mark Herman. Now, this is a game that's not for the faint of heart, right? This is a 10-pound box. It heralds back to the monster games. And this is an original design, too. If you're not familiar with it, this is a remake of the 1985 game designed as well by Mark Herman. And in this game, he's come in and refined things based on user feedback. I think he's added a number of scenarios. And the scope and scale of this game is massive. I mean, we're talking 9 counter sets. If one rulebook is enough, there's 3 rulebooks in there. GMT rates the complexity at an 8 out of 9. However, Mark Herman tweeted the other day that, this is a 9+. I mean, this is a game you're going to invest some time to play in. Now, the game covers the strategic level, the operational level of the campaigns and scenarios in the Pacific War. And then it also covers, there's a tactical element, if I understand, in some of these campaign scenarios as well. Now, from talking to people, my understanding is that the campaign is not the strength of the game. The strategic level, start of the war, end of the war campaign is not the strength of this game, but where this game, the meat of this game is really in the operational scenarios. And there is perhaps no game that does these better. And that's one reason in particular, if we talk about why I'm interested in this, is to be able to dig into these operational scenarios, Guadalcanal scenario. And also, I think I've been back in wargaming now for, about 8 months now. And I feel like I'm ready for a really hard game, a game that you really lean into, and you spend some time learning, and then you go in and you can play. And with the amount of scenarios and the amount of content then that's in this game, the replayability and the depth of this game is just silly. Now, it's also, for the most part, it's very solitaire friendly. So if you're looking for something to play solitaire, to dig into the history of these encounters, this would be a game that I think would work pretty well for that as well. I've got this one on pre-order. I'm excited for its arrival in the next few weeks or so, and I look forward to digging in. Next up is a game you may not have heard of yet, a hot, dry season, Operation Attleboro. This will be from Legion Wargames and designed by Patrick Mullen. This is an operational level game set in Vietnam, based on the National Liberation Front's offensive in the dry season of 1966. Now, it's a company-sized game, there's day turns, and it's about 1 mile per hex. Now, there's a couple of reasons that I'm excited about this game. The first of which is the designer. I've been following him on a Wargames forum now for about maybe 2 or 3 years. And I think this man, especially with regards to the Vietnam conflict, knows more about the Vietnam conflict than I would ever learn in about 3 lifetimes. So he's got a level of expertise that he brings to design that I think is almost unmatched. Now, secondly, I think one of the interesting mechanics that I find about this game is some of his thinkings on intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, so ISR, that he's trying to bring to this game. Basically, one of the elements of the Vietnam War is you just didn't know what's happening a lot. And so you're constantly trying to make decisions around ambiguity. And one of the designer's goals in this game is to bring that level of ambiguity with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance into the game and to make that a key part of how you play the game. I don't think that's something that games often do very well, so I'm really excited to see what can be done with it in this game, and that's why this game has piqued my interest. Now, with that kind of a mechanic too, it's probably worth noting that this is going to be designed as a two-player experience, right? It's not really going to have a strong solitaire component to it. So there is that to be considered, but with the mechanics you're trying to build. That's, of course, an understandable design decision that you just have to make. Now, this game is about 60% of the way through Legion Wargames' CPO system, so it needs a little bit less than about another 100 orders to see the light of day. And if it does, I think the intent is that this would be the first in a number of games in a series like this. So very excited. I hope this one makes the light of day. If it interests you, go take a look on their website and give it a look, because I think it'll be a game that will be very unique, very creative, and could surprise a lot of people with terms of the elements to which it brings some novel mechanics in an exciting way to the gameplay. Let's take a look now at Enemy Action Kharkov. Now, this game is from Compass Games and designed by John Butterfield. And if I might say something to start with, pretty much if you mention John Butterfield as a designer, you've caught my ear and I'm interested. Now, this is the second game in the series. The first game was Enemy Action Ardennes, which was about the Battle of the Bulge. Now, this game is, of course, it's about the Germans and the Soviets fighting around Stalingrad in late winter 1943. The reason why I'm interested in this game is that it's not one game, it's 3 games in one. And I have to kind of explain a little bit first, but you've got the 2-player game, which has its own map and its own rule book. Then you have the single-player game that you can play as the Soviet side. Then you have the solitaire game that you can play as the German side. So it's really 3 games in one. Each game has its own rule book and its own map, and they all use the same counter set. Now, I know a lot of people who consider Enemy Action Ardennes to be the finest solitaire war game ever made. So I think we're talking about another iteration on that to get into Enemy Action Kharkov. I think this could be a spectacular game and of particular interest to solitaire war gamers out there. So I'm very much looking forward to this one. Now, I have been looking on Board Game Geek, and I've seen that the production and the release of this one has been, let's just say, it's the right way to put it, slipping a little bit. It's right now on the Compass Games website listed as March 2022. Not sure how accurate that is, but I'm hopeful that we'll see Enemy Action Kharkov at some point in this year. To me, it seems like almost an immediate buy, especially if you're a solitaire wargamer and you're looking for a new and perhaps the pinnacle of solitaire wargaming. This would be a game to check out for sure. Sensuikan, Compass Games, Gregory Smith. Now, this is a game about Japanese fleet submarines from 1941 to 1945. And if you're familiar with Gregory Smith, you know he is the designer behind the submarine series, kind of the Hunters, the Hunted, Silent Victory. So this is a guy who has been designing solitaire submarine simulation systems for quite a while now. So when we're talking about his latest iteration on that design series, I'm particularly excited to see what he's done, because each of the games there's a lot of overlap between these games, right? You're doing the same things. You're going out on submarine patrols, but each one of the games has its own kind of twists and variations and unique aspects and things. And I think too, with Sensuikan, by kind of looking through some of the details, looks like they've added in a couple of other mechanics and a couple of other play systems that are going to be interesting to explore. Be very interesting to see the Pacific War submarine battles from the Japanese side. And I can imagine too, as you're getting later in the war, it's going to be particularly hard to survive. And one of the things that these games do particularly well, I mean, this is very much, I think, in the format of narrative gameplay, right? The story of your submarine is going to be twisting and turning and full of tension and drama. And the ability for these series to create that type of narrative is just spectacular. So pretty much any one of these games I'm getting, because I'm just a sucker for submarines and I love the narratives that they just generate. And I've found each one of the games in these series to be unique enough to be worth getting and to be worth exploring. And a couple of things that caught my eye in particular with this game is in the details of the game is listed 4 tactical combat display maps, which is actually kind of, I think, 10 maps altogether. So that's something that really doesn't exist in its predecessor. So I'm really curious to see why you need so many tactical, why they've created so many tactical display maps. Like, how is that going to work in the game? So that sounds a lot different. And a captain and crew status display map, a map as well, a mat, which is something that it's not emphasized in some of the earlier games. So I'm curious to see what kind of elements might be brought to the game in this. So it sounds like it's going to have a few fresh mechanics to bring into the submarine solitaire simulation series. Just a lot of S's in a row. So I'm pretty excited for this one. Unfortunately, this isn't coming up anytime on the near horizon. It's listed on the Compass Games website for 2023. So hopefully we'll see that next year. We got a long wait, but hopefully it'll be worth it. Speaking of submarines, let's talk about Infernal Machine. Designed by Jeremy White and Ed Ostermeyer and published by to be published by GMT Games. Now, this, as well as Sensuikan, is a solitaire game, but this one's got quite a different twist on it. This one puts you in the role of an entrepreneur or inventor in the mid-19th century. Now, I got a chance to listen to the designers talk about this game at the recent San Diego Historical Games Conference, and I'm really excited for this one because this is much more than just a submarine simulation. This one, of course, you're mid-19th century, Civil War. There's two, really the game breaks down into two parts, right? The first part is you're an entrepreneur, business person who's trying to create this business of producing submarines. And you're trying to basically invent and put these parts together and get things that work. And you're trying to create something that's going to be a functional submarine that then you can subsequently send out on missions as part of a campaign game that goes multiple missions strung together. Now you can play, I understand that either you can take the side of the Confederate or the Union side as you build your company and you kind of go on these missions in the campaign. And reading through the details and listening to designers talk about the details, I mean, it sounds like things can go, let's just say, I think losing is going to be as much fun as winning because of the number of different ways that this game can go sideways. I mean, your submarine can sink, you can lose your engineers. The characters you're hiring to bring into your company have different skills and you can develop them. So it's just rich layers upon layers of this kind of role-playing, almost narrative, strategic business war simulation. That's a lot. And at first I was kind of thinking like, okay, could you pull this off? And in particular, because I think business simulations are tough to do well. Let me just say that. I think that can be a tricky part of it. But watching the designers talk about the game and seeing them play through the early parts of the game, I think this one could be really fun. And it's got submarines. Now, of course, this as well is a solitaire game. You're going to be building your submarine company, if you would, as you kind of invent and build and put these different pieces on and then lead them off into missions and things like that. But I think this could be an extremely interesting, unique, and creative game. And Jeremy White, of course, has a strong pedigree as a game designer. So I'm really excited to see what the combination of Jeremy White and Ed Ostermeyer can put out together. So looking forward to this one. Now, it is in GMT's P500 system, and it is short of 500 orders. I think it just hit their P500 system a little while ago, so it's made strong progress, but I still think it needs, last time I checked, I think it was about 200 orders for it to reach that magic 500 mark. So if you're interested in that one, you can go check it out on their website. I'll put links down below to this one as well as all the other games. I'm particularly excited about this next game, Lanzerath Ridge from DVG Games and designed by David Thompson, with Nils Johansson doing the graphic design and artwork on this one. This one has me excited for a lot of reasons. The first of which is this is the fourth game in the Valiant Defense series of David Thompson, and all of the other three games are outstanding, right? You've got Castle Itter, Pavlov's House, and Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms, which all have received acclaimed reviews. This is kind of a further iteration of that series, and each one of these games has added different mechanics and tweaked things and refined things a little bit. So I'm particularly excited to see where the series ends up with this fourth game. Now, just a little bit of the history of the game. This is a game that happens on the very first day of the Battle of the Bulge, where it's actually based on a historical engagement where 22 U.S. troopers held off about 500 German paratroopers for the better part of a day. And so what you're doing, it's very much similar kind of to like a tower defense type of game in the PC environment where you've got vastly outnumbered and you're holding off for as long as you possibly can. This is a game you're going to lose, and you're going to lose again and again. And each time you're going to try to do it better and better until you finally, hopefully, one time can win. So it's got kind of this rogue element mixed in with a tower defense, whereas you're learning how to do it better each time you play. And gameplay's fast, right? It's estimated to take about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. So these are quick games that you're going to be able to play, trying different tactics and different strategies and things like that. Now, it's also worth noting that David Thompson is, of course, the lead designer of the Undaunted series, which has received great acclaim too. So pretty much everything the guy's designs has been very, very successful. So there's no reason to think that this one's not going to be anywhere near as good. So I think there's a good pedigree of design here. And we've got a further iteration of the series that makes it even really more exciting. There's some other reasons why I'm particularly excited about this one. The artwork is absolutely stunning. I mean, if you've seen some of the maps, and I'll put a couple of screenshots as we go along here, it's just beautiful. And it's actually detailed based on what it historically was like on that day of the battle. And so you've got so much historical research into what happened. And all the counters, the US counters, they're named after the actual soldiers that fought in the battle. You get with a lot of David's games, he provides a historical research, a historical book, if you would. It's a short kind of book that talks a little bit about the history behind the engagement. So this game, not only is it fun and engaging, it's got deep roots in historical accuracy. And so for those reasons, I just think it's going to be a really fun game to play, and I'm really looking forward. It's, of course, a solitaire game. You know, it's one player. You're playing the U.S. troops against the German troops, trying to last as long as you can. But I'm very, very excited about this one coming up. Now, this one has just hit Kickstarter this week, so if you want, you can go to the Kickstarter page and you can join up that way. Expected release, I think, is August of 2022. Next up, Stalingrad Roads by Nuts Publishing and designed by Nicholas Rydent. Now, this is a two-player game set in late 1942, early 1943, around the Stalingrad area, where Russian forces are going to launch an offensive, and then later on, German forces are going to counterattack. So it's a very fast-moving and fluid game. If you're not familiar with the Roads series now, this would be the third game that carries kind of the spirit of this game series. The first is the very highly acclaimed and extraordinarily fun Liberty Roads, which I've been trying to get my hands on, which we'll talk about momentarily. Then the second game was Victory Roads. This one is the third one, perhaps a little smaller scale than the first two games, but still keeping that same design spirit. I mean, one of the unique things about this is there are no zones of control. So you're going to have a lot of different ways. It's a different type of hex encounters game than you probably played before. But if they capture anywhere near the excellence of the Liberty Roads game with this one, I think it's one that's going to be really fun to play. Now, the other thing I will say about this game is it might have the most beautifully designed counters I've seen. The Road series is kind of famous for that, for having this just gorgeous and really compelling artwork. And as we can see here, the counters in this game are exquisitely designed and executed. So I am very excited for this one. I think it's going to play fast. I think it's going to be fun. I'm really excited to try a game like this that doesn't have zones of controls for a hex encounters game like this. And I think if it can keep up to that spirit and excellence that's been in the Liberty Roads game in particular, I think we could have something really special here. I think this one is coming. This one should be coming in 2022. I'm not sure of the exact date, but hopefully coming to our game shelves relatively soon. I want to talk about some more roads. I want to talk about Liberty Roads. Now, Liberty Roads is not a new game. It's a reprint, kind of like Pacific War, but more of a direct reprint than new. But it hasn't been reprinted for so long that it actually is going to feel very new. This is a game published by Hexasim in Europe, and it will be sold in the United States by GMT Games. Designed by Nicholas Rydent, who's also working on the Stalingrad Roads game, and co-designed by Yves Lequelec. My apologies if I've butchered the French pronunciation on this one. Now, this is a game that covers, just to kind of set the overview. Okay, this is a game that starts in the 6th of June, 1944, the D-Day landings, although they could be in different places in the game, and it goes until March 1945. Kind of large operational, strategic level game. You're going to be fighting through France and through portions of Germany, Western Germany, and stuff like that. And you get the idea. It's going to be a breakout game. Now, this is a game, this area has been covered, of course, by other games. And it's Dark Summer in particular, Normandy 44. But if you look at the reviews on this game and you look at some of the things that have been said about this game, this is why I'm particularly excited about it. First of all, it gets an 8.1 rating on Board Game Geek. It sits in the top 100 war games at number 52 on the list I was looking at last night. So this is a game that has an ardent following, people calling it much as a masterpiece. Fast-moving, quick playing. Again, we mentioned with Stalingrad Roads, there's no zones of control. So I'm kind of figuring out how this is all going to work. But apparently it is brilliantly executed in one of the top executions of this conflict in board wargaming today. I've been trying to get my hands on it for the longest time, and you just can't. It's like $150 or more on eBay, those kinds of things. We all know what that's like. I've been waiting for the reprint and heard there was going to be a reprint, and actually, annoyingly, yes, it is very annoying. I'm sorry. On GMT's website, there's an add to cart button for the Liberty Roads game and a whole page for it. And so you get super excited and then you click on add to cart and you get this little pink line that goes, sorry, this game is not in stock, sucker. I'm like, well, what's the deal with this? When is this game going to come out? Is it really being reprinted? If you look at the Liberty Roads website in France on the Hexasim game, on the Hexasim company, it talks about it being reprinted, but it's been 2011. There hasn't been any news. But literally less than 24 hours from me making this video, there was a post on Board Game Geek by someone in the know who says, many of the components are now in the house. We can expect release of this game within a few weeks. Color me excited. I am ready. This will be an instant buy for me. I'm very excited to give this one a shot. I think it's got different mechanics. Also, it's worth saying, like Stalingrad Roads, the counter design and the art and the execution, the visual execution on this game is top notch. For a big game that's covering a lot of ground, my understanding is this game plays fast and fluid. It is tons of fun, and they did a really good job with the balancing the conflict to make it fun for both sides, whether you're the German side trying to defend or whether your allies trying to attack. So I am very excited for this game because of its super strong following, because of its great reviews, its high rankings, because of everything that I can see about the game. This looks like it's going to be a ton of fun to play. So color me very, very excited about this one. I, Napoleon, published by GMT Games and designed by Ted Racer. Now, this game went to P500 just a little while ago, and I think within 7 minutes, it got its 500 order minimum. So I'm hopeful this one makes it through the P500 queue, which can sometimes take as long as college in a relatively effective fashion. And we might even see this one, perhaps could we dream to see this game in 2022. Now, what's this game about? Well, it's extremely exciting concept, right? Basically, you get to live the life. This is a solitaire game where you live the life of Napoleon. Now, one of my goals for 2022 is to play a couple more games around the Napoleonic era because I just haven't played that many games about it, and I don't know that much about the history. So I'm looking for games in this style, and then I see this game pop up. So I put this one on P500 order. I'm very excited for it. It had me at the very last line, which was that this one here is every game will provoke a different narrative. You could lead a glorious and famous life as Napoleon, or you can die in ignominy. You're going to have to manage your family, politics, military campaigns. You could end up in the Americas, the Near East. So many decisions that are all driven by this 220 card deck that's going to kind of drive gameplay and drive your decisions. So it looks like almost like as I'm reading the description of the game, I feel like it's almost like a choose your own adventure, except not as easy, with a lot more dice rolls, a lot more intricacies, and a lot more just kind of fun mechanics to play and a lot of different things to manage. So it's kind of like choose your adventure on steroids driven by cards, might be kind of the way that I do this. But I love games that generate a narrative. And for me, I'm very curious about learning more about this era. So this was a no-brainer. And I'm hopeful that we can see this one again get through the P500 system pretty quickly. Available on the GMT websites in their P500 system for ordering right now. Very excited for this one. Our next game isn't a war game per se, but it is a game about conflict and struggle. I'm talking about Votes for Women, the upcoming game from Fort Circle Games designed by Tori Brown. Now, this is a 6-turn game. You start in 1848 and it ends in 1920 with, if you're on the side that's fighting for ratification of the 19th Amendment, with women gaining the right to vote. Of course, this was a historic struggle that went over decades for women's suffrage. And this game tries to capture the subtleness and the challenges and the strategies and the conflict behind this movement. I'm excited for this game for a number of reasons. One is, the first game in this company, Fort Circle's first game was Shores of Tripoli, which was, it's an easy to access game that allows for deep thinking. And the other thing I really liked about Shores of Tripoli is that it's highly educational. I think Votes for Women has the capacity to be even more so. I could easily see this game being brought into schools to teach kids about the women's suffrage movement in a way that could electrify them and really energize them in the subject, as well as being a fun game for everybody to play. So if Votes for Women captures that same nuance and design and kind of energy that Shores of Tripoli have, I think this is going to be a very electric game and a fun game to play. Accessible, challenges us, and gets us to think. I'm also excited. I've been following the game on Twitter. It's had a massive play test, a lot of different ways. And the fact that there's 3 games, like you can play it solitaire against the solo bot, which if you play it solitaire, you're working for women's suffrage, and the solo bot is against it. You can play it competitively, or you can also play it cooperatively, where two players are working for women's suffrage and trying to get the 19th Amendment ratified, whereas the solo bot is then working against you that way. So a lot of different ways to play. I think this is a game that's going to have a lot of different strategies. It's going to have card play, a lot of different interesting mechanics in it. At the same time, being a relatively simple game to dig into, it's not going to have a lot of rules overhead. You're going to be able to jump right in. I expect it's going to play fast as well. So it's a type of game you could play 2 or 3 times in an evening, where you could start or end a gaming evening with something like this and pull it out. Also, I think this game, like Shores of Tripoli, I feel like it could have the potential to bring non-war gamers closer to the wargaming genre, in the sense of a lot of the mechanics are going to be similar. A lot of the tactics and strategies that you're thinking about as you play this game are very much present in a lot of board war games too. So very excited for this one. I applaud the cause as well. I really think games about subjects like this, especially in today's world, can be very, very powerful. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing this one come out later this year. So there we have it, 10 randomly selected upcoming games for 2022 and beyond, some of which actually need help if they're going to see the light of day. Let me know what you think. Any games on this list that you're particularly excited about? Are there games that you're particularly excited about that you'd like to see me include in an upcoming episode? Because if this one seems to resonate well and people seem to enjoy it, I think I'd like to make these every once in a while going forward, as I kind of build up a list of 10 games or so that I'm super excited about that are coming on. I could probably make a couple of more lists right away, just based on, there's probably another 20 games out there that I'm very excited about. This is by far not my top 10. This were 10 that I kind of picked out for this one to kind of get a variety and balance in there too. But are there any of these you're going to get? Any of these you'd like to see? If you've got other games you'd like to see included in this episode, let me know down in the comments below, or reach out if you'd like to connect in a different way. Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new, please consider subscribing. Love to hear what you think, and have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye.